Hi, friend. It's your inner child calling. And they want churros. A new toy. And a new adventure. Or maybe 5. With the bestest besties on Earth. Find your moment at Walt Disney World Resort.
I'm Nicola Coughlan, and for BBC Radio 4, this is history's youngest heroes. Rebellion, risk, and the radical power of youth.
She thought, right, I'll just do it. She thought about others rather than herself.
12 stories of extraordinary young people from across history.
There's a real sense of urgency in them, that resistance has to be mounted, it has to be mounted now.
Follow history's youngest heroes wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, I'm Maddie Foley, and I'm a producer here at Wonder Media Network. I'm so excited to be guest hosting this episode of Womanica. This month, we're talking about architects. These women held fast to their visions for better futures, found potential in negative space, and built their creations from the ground up. For a while, today's Womanican was more famous for the buildings she hadn't built than the ones she had. Critics thought her kaleidoscopic ideas were too far-fetched to ever be a reality. But her singular focus and determination brought her dreams to fruition, transcending social, cultural, and physical barriers. Let's talk about the Queen of the Curve, Zaha Hadid. Zaha was born in 1950 in Baghdad, Iraq. At the time, the Iraqi economy was flourishing, and the country was focused on embracing liberal, secular values. It was a moment of great optimism, driven by a deep belief in progress. Zaha's father was a politician, economist, and industrialist at the forefront of progressive politics in the region. Seeing her father in a powerful role at such a young age showed little Zaha that she, too, could shoot for the stars. Growing up, Zaha bounced between Switzerland and Baghdad for school. When she was just 6, an architect working for her family came to her house with lots of drawings and models. Zaha was enthralled. Not long after, she officially decided she wanted to become an architect. Her reasoning? She liked drawing maps and could draw a more or less perfect circle. Zaha was a woman of her word. She went on to earn a mathematics degree from the American University in Beirut. And then, in 1972, attended the world-famous Architectural Association, or the AA, in London. Even though female architects were few and far between at the time, the AA didn't subscribe to tradition. It was the perfect place for Zaha to explore because of its focus on the avant-garde. Here, she met an important mentor and fellow architect, Rem Koolhaas. Rem took a liking to Zaha and invited her to become a partner at his newly established firm after she graduated in 1977. But in the world of architecture, Zaha stuck out like a sore thumb. Her designs were unlike anything else. Instead of sharp lines and right angles, Zaha's work was all about fluidity. As one of her mentors at the AA once said, she was the inventor of the 89 degrees. Zaha embraced the chaos of modern life and created spaces that were organic and dynamic, unbound by existing rules. In Zaha's conception of the built environment, space undulated and morphed ambiguously as people walked through. Zaha soon left Rem's firm and went back to the AA to teach, while developing her own firm, which she launched in 1980. Her style was singular. As Rem explained, Zaha was a planet in her own inimitable orbit. It took many years for Zaha to get her peculiar new brand of architecture off the ground. At first, viewers were confused by the shapes that she used in her designs. They didn't understand her vision. As a result, one of her first big projects, The Peak, a spa planned for Hong Kong, was never actually built. nor were several other projects. Notoriously, Zaha's winning design for the Cardiff Bay Opera House was abandoned because local lobbyists resisted what they saw as an overly progressive design being imposed on their more conservative Welsh city. This was a difficult learning experience, but it taught Zaha the political machinations necessary to get her work actually built. Despite the tricky start, Zaha eventually found her footing and got a big break designing the Rosenthal Center for Contemporary Art in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was an ambitious take on the curatorial and museum-going experience. Galleries were housed in oblong tubes that floated above the ground, connected via ramps that zigged and zagged through the structure. Some describe it as an urban carpet, where space is rolled up and piled high. The New York Times called it the most important new building in America since the Cold War. Soon, Zaha had plenty of successful projects to point to whenever critics said that her designs were impossible. Commissions poured in, and she was off to the races. A ferry terminal and high-speed train station in Italy, a private residence in Moscow, a library in France. There was no stopping her. Zaha also constructed several buildings in her adopted home of Britain. She even designed the London 2012 Olympic Aquatics Center. However prolific, Zaha was not wholly embraced by the public. She was often criticized for building her extravagant projects in controversial areas. For instance, she was attacked by preservationists in Beijing after constructing a gigantic office and leisure complex in a culturally sensitive part of the city. To make room for the new building, traditional neighborhoods were bulldozed. Zaha also came under fire after building a cultural center in Azerbaijan. The center was commissioned by the Azerbaijani government, which was known for its corruption and flagrant human rights abuses. People thought building the center on behalf of the nefarious government was unconscionable. Zaha saw things differently. First, as an Arab designer, she felt strongly that her work should be in a place like Azerbaijan, a country where Soviet, Turkish, and Persian cultures converge. Second, she believed engagement with the masses was better than nothing at all. She explained, if I say I'm not going to build in certain places, there are lots of places I wouldn't go to either. I wouldn't be doing anything anywhere. I just wouldn't build. Despite her divisive reputation, Zaha achieved incredible success. Some of her highest profile projects are the Museum of 21st Century Art in Rome, the Guangzhou Opera House in China, the Riverside Museum in Scotland, and the BMW Central Building in Germany. She also taught at Harvard, Columbia, Yale, the University of Chicago, and the University of Applied Arts, Vienna. Most notably, she became the first woman and Arab to receive the Pritzker Prize in 2004, the highest honor for an architect. Zaha never married or had any children. She lived alone in London and kept the majority of her personal life private. She rarely went back home to Iraq. Most of the people she'd grown up with had passed away or moved away. However, she maintained a strong connection to her cultural roots and talked openly about the difficulty of making a name for herself as a female Arab architect. In 2016, Zaha experienced a sudden heart attack while in Miami and passed away. She was 65 years old. Despite this, her legacy continues. Her firm retains her name and plans to roll out nearly 50 more structures posthumously. That's as many buildings as were created in her lifetime. Throughout her career, critics criticized Zaha of being a showboat whose designs were completely unrealistic. To Zaha, that was the whole point. As she once said, "We don't deal with normative ideas and we don't make nice little buildings. People think that the most appropriate building is a rectangle because that's typically the best way of using space. But is that to say that landscape is a waste of space? The world is not a rectangle. You don't go into a park and say, my God, we don't have any corners." All month, we're talking about architects. For more information, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Womanica Podcast. Special thanks to Jenny and Liz Kaplan for having me as a guest host. Talk to you on Monday.
I'm Nicola Coughlan, and for BBC Radio 4, this is history's youngest heroes. Rebellion, risk, and the radical power of youth.
She thought, right, I'll just do it. She thought about others rather than herself.
12 stories of extraordinary young people from across history.
There's a real sense of urgency in them, that resistance has to be mounted, it has to be mounted now.
Follow History's Youngest Heroes wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Eric Andre. I made a podcast called Bombing about absolutely tanking on stage. I tell gnarly stories, and I talk to friends about their worst moments of bombing in all sorts of ways. Bombing on stage, bombing in public, bombing in life. Like the time I stole a girl's phone during a set and she jumped on stage and threw a big haymaker punch to my nose. Listen to Bombing with Eric Andre on Will Ferrell's Big Money Players Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.